From cutting down inventory to holding back paychecks, we've seen some really mean owners on the show. But these owners are the biggest liars yet. Just like this guy who was willing to lie through his teeth but not give up. You see, Rich Marinachi was willing to go to any lengths necessary to save his bar. He even brought in his entire family to help. Clearly, that was a desperate move, but did it work out in his favor? Rich was a successful franchise and property owner until 2006, when the owners of a buffet restaurant defaulted and abandoned the place for good. Rich saw this as an opportunity to try and start his own business, which is pretty much how the Sideline Sports Bar and Grill in Mount Dora, Florida came to be. To get things started, Rich invested a whopping $75,000 into the business. Which worked out, cause initially it saw some success. By 2014, he was making up to 50 grand every year. But since the property owner wasn't the most experienced person when it came to running a bar, he soon found himself in the middle of some tough situations. He started to realize that the business was gonna take way more than his willingness to keep its doors open. And soon, he struggled to keep things afloat. Rich even admitted to having no idea what he was doing, and hey, it really showed. Despite being the owner of a failing business, let me remind you, this is what he did for most of the day.
Rich has no idea what's going on, of course.
Needless to say, with absolutely no organization in the kitchen or the bar, some major issues cropped up. Our clueless friend Rich had to outsource infrastructure and overhead costs because he didn't understand any of it. Soon enough, he had to bring his father in to cover his debt, and the poor old man was left to take care of his son's midlife crisis. Since he couldn't afford to pay his staff, he decided to employ his two sons to work the kitchen instead. I mean, it's always good to help your family during tough times, right? But here's the kicker. These boys were still in school.
I'm currently going to school and I'm struggling. It kills me.
And Rich wasn't even appreciative of their services. Instead, he treated them like absolute trash. Like seriously, who talks to their kids like this?
He was cooking, that was it.
You say one more word to me, I'm gonna punch you in the mouth.
It looked like Rich had given up on everything. But he had found a way to cope with his failing business by drinking at his own bar. Throughout the recon, Taffer noticed that the boys had no idea what they were doing. They were probably only there because of their dad. What made things even worse was that they didn't even get along with each other. The two of them were constantly quarreling while also breaking every health code in the book. And Taffer was shocked to see this.
Didn't he just pick up raw
Chicken. That's
with those
what I'm
hands? He
worried
never
about.
washed his hands.
As the night pressed on, contaminated food was being served to the customers, and Taffer refused to let them get away with it. When the experts decided to confront Rich, instead of taking responsibility for the lapse in service, this man stormed into the kitchen to give his boys an earful. This is when something really shocking happened. While the younger brother walked away in a fit of rage, what happened with the older one was crazy.
You're supposed to check this before you serve it.
Did Rich actually smack him in the face? Leave your son alone. That's absolutely no way to treat an employee, let alone your kid. This is when Taffer realized that things had gone too far and decided to step in. He first pulled aside the two brothers and tried to understand their side of the story. Obviously, it seemed like neither of them wanted anything to do with the bar. Worried that the boys might blurt out more than they should, Rich butted into the conversation and blatantly lied to Taffer.
God darn it, they have to get their together too.
Really, but you don't.
No, I don't.
According to him, his boys were not only irresponsible, but also lazy. However, Taffer had already seen the truth and knew who was really the lazy one around here. He then gave a good clap back to Rich for spewing nonsense and dissed him right in front of everyone. This guy definitely had it coming after everything that he'd done. What kind of dad does that to their own kid? I mean, that's definitely pushing the limits, but this next one wasn't about the dad, it was all about the inadequacy of his child. When the Scoreboard Bar in Norwalk, California was featured in Season 3, it was already going down under. And the issue here was that the owner, Larry Herrick, couldn't figure out why. All he really did was invest in his daughter's dream of owning a bar and never once thought about the consequences of doing so. Larry's daughter, Michelle, wasn't alone in the business. She'd gotten her husband, Barry, to invest in it as well. Together, the family was confident that things would go their way since Michelle even had a degree in management.
When something's broken and we tell Michelle, it doesn't get fixed.
And just like any other bar, when things first started, everything went smoothly. Until one day, they started to feel pretty overwhelmed by the issues concerning the maintenance and upkeep of the place. As the business started to take a hit, Larry stopped receiving his share of the profits while Michelle and her husband desperately tried to keep things afloat. Despite Michelle's husband taking up a job as a handyman, the couple still managed to find themselves in a debt of over $360,000. With no other option in sight, the couple decided to put their bar up for sale. But before doing that, they wanted to give it one last shot by calling Taffer and his team right over.
Not much of a draw here at all.
It's below the market.
This time around, Taffer invited 2 experts from his crew, who happened to be his friends, to do some recon for him. I'm talking about none other than the television personality Maria Menounos and her fiancé Kevin Undergaro. While the pair were really excited to help Taffer with the recon, they were disappointed when they were served the wrong drink.
This is supposed to be a strawberry margarita.
My bad.
What's even worse is when the couple ordered for a platter of wings and potato skins, every item served on the plate was either undercooked or straight up raw. You could almost see Taffer cringe in the car before he decided to barge in.
Oh, that's gross.
Don't eat that, Kevin.
Going in.
It's quite understandable why Taffer was fuming, but Michelle probably didn't get the point. She was smiling like an idiot, which only infuriated Taffer that much more. Taffer then decided to make his point by bringing Michelle and her husband over to the experts, hoping to give them a little reality check. And just as you'd expect, the spies trashed the service and the maintenance of the bar.
Couldn't eat the chicken wings.
It was raw.
Raw.
But oh no, that wasn't even the worst part. When the expert mixologist took a closer look at the bar, what he found was shocking.
Your strawberry mix. It expired in August of 2012.
And where do I even start about the kitchen? It was way more nasty than you could ever imagine. I mean, just take a look at this, guys.
Look at the filth in here! It just keeps getting better, guys!
None of them could believe their eyes. Taffer had to make a decision without wasting another second.
You gotta prove yourself to me, Michelle! Shut it the down!
Yeah, he actually asked everyone to go home. The problem here was that Michelle kept lying to herself that she could run the bar. All she had to do was take a step back and maybe seek some professional help before it was way too late. But no, she wanted to be the one who called the shots, and sadly, it backfired real bad. That had to have been one of the most disgusting bars I've ever seen in the history of the show, but the one you're about to see next is an even bigger joke. The Elefino Bar and Grill, located in Las Vegas, opened its doors in 2017. The owner, John, started the business with the help of his friend Casey in hopes of providing a great experience to his customers. But things soon spiraled out of control when John started to make all the wrong decisions. The biggest problem was that John had leased out his kitchen. This meant that the most important part of the bar was locked away from the very beginning.
I just didn't have the money to be able to open up the bar and open up the kitchen.
Now, Casey did try her very best to talk some sense into John. But this man was so arrogant that she decided it was better for herself to leave than to see the sinking ship before her very eyes. With over $100,000 of debt, John finally made the call to Bar Rescue to try and salvage his business. When Taffer arrived at the bar, the first person he wanted to meet was Casey. The two of them sat back and watched as Taffer sent in 2 recons, one of which was a mixologist. Meanwhile, as Casey and Taffer chatted, the truth behind the bar's failure was revealed.
I get most frustrated with John when he gets overwhelmed with something and then he doesn't want to deal with it.
John's poor decision-making had cost them their friendship, and Taffer was about to see things play out right in front of him.
Anytime I would bring up an idea to John about something that we could do to help the bar, it was just constant pushback.
While Casey decided to walk away, Taffer was ready to take him down if need be. Okay, so let me back up a little bit and show you what happened during the recon. When the spies ordered a drink, John swooped in and ruined everything even before the bartender could finish what they started. And this was a daily affair. But why did he do that? Well, John forced the bartenders to make the drink with a pre-made mix that was sitting on the shelf. Little did he know that he was about to get busted.
It's exactly the same. Just gotta sell it,
You don't have any idea how embarrassing that is.
Well, the bartender wasn't at fault in any way. Because when the spies asked for a fresh drink, this time, without John's interference, the drink turned out to be perfect. However, their joy was short-lived. The recons found out that the only thing available to eat at the bar was a jar filled with pretzels. Needless to say, Taffer was shocked.
What the heck is going on?
Anyway, let's get to the moment when the 3 of them sat down for a chat. Taffer soon realized that John was someone who would rather lie than accept the truth.
You were pretty quick to land on I was being an ass. Didn't take you long to get there, did it?
John chose to live in denial despite knowing that he was being an absolute jerk. That's something that may have worked for him, but definitely not for his business. However, following that horrible display of management, you would think that there couldn't be anyone more stubborn than John. But you'll be surprised when you meet Patty, the co-owner of the Broadway club located in Tooele, Utah. Now, let me warn you, this woman might make you want to jump out of a window when she starts talking. You see, the club started out when Randy Hunt, the owner of the building, decided that he wanted to turn his space into something fun and profitable. He turned to his business partner Patty, who took up the job of managing and running the place despite not knowing the first thing about running a bar. The initial deal was for Patty to run the place, but there was a problem. Patty loved to party. She was more interested in having fun than taking charge. To make things worse, she didn't even allow any of her employees to work their jobs. She had gotten so out of control that she would often pick fights with her employees over nothing at all. Well, I don't think you could blame the staff for hating her. Poor Randy tried his very best to turn things around and get Patty to change, but since his debt kept piling up, he decided to call for some help. When Taffer arrived, it didn't take long for him to understand that Patty was responsible for the downfall of the business. From the very beginning of the recon, we could see that Patty didn't really care about her position as the owner of the bar and immediately started to drink. She was seen making her way around the customers and ranting about nonsense the whole time. After getting a good idea of what was wrong, Taffer decided to confront her. But you won't believe what Patty did. Yup, she started to bawl her eyes out as if she was the victim. However, Taffer knew better than to give in to her crocodile tears. He immediately started to go off on how she was hired to manage the place, but totally sucked at it. And that's when Patty decided to blame it all on her inexperience.
Whose shitball is it? Why?
Honestly, I'm inexperienced.
You see, there wasn't much that Patty was good at. Well, of course, she could drink, talk, and definitely be a Karen all day. But none of that was gonna help her with the business. Which is why Taffer stormed out after giving her a good earful, and I think she totally deserved this.
I walked out because your wife is a drunk.
Well, talk about being entitled. Now, this reminds me of two brothers who managed to send their parents into a whopping debt of $1.5 million. What's worse? Their dad had to go back to work because of the mounting debt. If you ask me, things were not looking good at Rocky Point Cantina, a Mexican-themed bar situated next to Arizona State University. The bar had turned into a complete mess under the management of Scott, the owner's son. The bar was being kept afloat by Jason, the younger brother, who did everything from fixing leaks to cooking the food.
I just think the bad idea was putting Scott in charge.
Mind you, Jason had no experience in any of these things, so he just did the best that he could. And considering he was responsible for so many things, it's no wonder most of his work ended up being sloppy. Since Scott was the one in charge of the place, he hired his best friend to tend to the bar, which was an even bigger disaster since the two of them constantly argued. To make things even worse, Scott had managed to drive away his crowd of normal customers by featuring head-banging metal bands as the live events. This created a violent environment that only a true metalhead could enjoy, scaring off everyone else. When Taffer arrived on the scene, he only found one person working the floor non-stop, and that was none other than Jason. But despite his efforts, the entire bar was disgusting. Even when Jason approached Scott for help, he refused to get off his ass and get to work. It's like he didn't even care.
Hey man, I come in here for 1 second, you're gonna come in here and talk.
But Taffer wasn't willing to take his behavior lying down. Since Scott was the one who did the least work, he picked the right job for him to do, which was to scrub down all the washrooms. Looks like Scott had this coming. Taffer then launched a soft reopening of the bar after a short period of training. While Anthony was all set to rock the bar, Jason stepped up to his game in the kitchen. The two of them were desperate to make things work, but as it turns out, the bar was too big to handle. Taffer then decided that the place needed a revamp with new staff to help them out. This is when he renamed the bar from Rocky Point Cantina to Havana. What's more, he even got someone to train Scott and, more importantly, teach him what not to do. Meanwhile, Jason got some help with handling the kitchen.
These things are not coming apart, man. Throw the whole thing on the grill. It'll loosen up.
But the biggest twist in this whole charade is that even after being trained, Anthony left the bar on opening night and never returned for the rest of the service. This man just underwent training from one of the best experts in town and then decided to leave everyone at the bar high and dry when he was needed most. Looks like Scott had been betrayed once again. But this time, he was wise enough to not let Anthony step foot in his business ever again.
Pretty pissed off right now. I'm not happy with him, and he's done here as far as I'm concerned.
After everything that went down, I could only hope that Scott learned his lesson. It would be wise for him to be truthful to himself and his family if he wants to bring his business back to life. But these weren't the only owners who lied to save face. I'm sure there are many, many more out there, which is why I invite you to join me on my Discord server to talk about bar rescue and more for free. And guess what? I even have an exclusive server for those of you who are interested. Well, I'm excited to see you there, but before you leave, make sure to smack that like button, subscribe, and turn on my post notifications. Also, don't forget to check out my latest video right here since it's even crazier.